Namaste, welcome to another episode of Navima's podcast. So today again we have with us Dr. Bijeet Prashantha, the author of Hindu Nation and Hindu Genocides. Apologies to the audience. I am not able to turn on the camera for a few minutes. So there is a technical issue that we had faced. So we have fixed the issue. Just we're checking a few things before we get the camera on. So in the meantime, I will just request Vijita to just give an overview of what we're going to talk today and what is our discussion topics. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So today, on the eve of 26th Jan, our Republic Day, we are going to discuss a very specific chapter from B.R. Ambedkar's book, Pakistan or the Partition of India. This is a very important book to understand the communal politics in India in 1940s. And we are pretty much going to discuss and read some part of chapter 11, and this chapter is titled Communal Aggression, right? Communal aggression in this context, B.R. Ambedkar is basically saying, just give me a second, I have to probably switch off my fan for the better audio. And chapter 11, communal aggression, and communal aggression, obviously from the Muslim side, that B.R. Ambedkar is discussing here. So, in case you don't know, in this book, Pakistan or the Partition of India, B.R. Ambedkar wrote a very sort of socio-political and historical account of Islam in India. And then he pretty much opined that it is it is good for the Hindus to accept this partition of India, uh, with the fact that with the strategy that a complete population exchange will take place, which means that that the whatever I mean population of Muslims are there in the quote unquote mainland India will go to the Pakistan side, and whatever Hindu population was there in the newly created Pakistan will come back to the mainland India, the Republic of India, post 1947. And so this is chapter 11. And yeah, so in order to set the pretext of this chapter, I am going to sort of lay out the foreground in which this chapter was written. In this chapter, basically what B.R. Ambedkar is trying to prove is that soon after 1905, when Muslim League was created, it was actually persistent, communally aggressive demand from Muslim League to the British to implement various electoral and legislative reforms. And uh, and uh, B.R. Ambedkar wondered, British took almost no time in implementing those highly communal divisive reforms in the legislation of India, or in the Parliament of Britain as well as in India, that eventually sort of created the vertical split between Hindu and Muslim community, and that eventually led to the partition in 1947. So, in the coming 15 minutes, I'm just going to discuss how this two nation theory was very cunningly implemented by the British and the motivation behind it. Um, and uh, and after these 15-20 minutes, we are going to discuss the main body of this chapter, where B.R. Ambedkar is actually showing us what were the demands of the Muslim leagues, right? And how that actually grew into a very dangerous, aggressive level, and and it British did not care, and anyway implemented those and accepted those demands, highly communal, Ashrafi demands by the Muslim League. Okay. Okay, so now for the 15-20 minutes, as promised, I'm going to discuss promotion of the two nation theory. Right. So Congress was born in 1880s, and at least in its manifesto, it was saying ki, this institution is going to consolidate the political power of the Indian people by unifying people in every nook of the Indian subcontinent, right? And it is around this time. I mean, the Congress was created by Alan Octavian Hume. So obviously there was a hidden agenda by the British to create a Babu class from within the Hindu society who will talk and walk and understand and interpret in the language of the British, right? Um, so that was one part, right, to create this elite Babu Congressi class of people. And then at the same time, the British colluded with the Ashraf, the invading Muslim community, quote unquote, the higher caste community in Indian Muslim. Um, so the British and these higher caste Muslims, they came together to propagate the two nation theory without any shame. Okay, so it was during these 1880s. It was the same period where Sayyid Ahmed Khan was giving fiery speeches, which was like, I mean, very much separatist against the advancement of Bengalis, for example, who were doing good with the English education. And then it was in this context Lord Duffin came up with the two nation theory in November 1888. Okay, so around this 1885 to 1888, it was first Sayyid Ahmed Khan and then the Lord Dufferin. So Sayyid Ahmed Khan probably for the first time pitched this two nation theory. In Specifically in one of his speeches, which is the famous or infamous Meerut speech, and then Lord Dufferin, the then Viceroy of India, sort of accepted it in November 1888. Okay, he proposed, the Lord Duffin proposed that Muslims in British India constituted a nation of 50 million people with their monotheism, their iconoclastic fanaticism, their animal sacrifices, their social equality, and their remembrance of the days when enthroned at Delhi, they reigned supreme from the Himalayas to Cape Cormoran, unquote. Right. So, and I am quoting these from different books, like a book like Mike, I think Aim Titus, Indian Musalman, and also a book by P. Hardy. So both of them are British historian or white historian, and it was sort of the primary account. So this is to prove that I am not saying anything after distorting the history. Okay, so these are first-hand account. These are being said at that time by Lord Dufferin, right? So Lord Dufferin said that okay, Muslims are a different nation of 15 million people. So the first time you are hearing these kind of things, that Muslims are different nation. Okay, and nevertheless, I mean, we have to remember that this was just a narrative which was far from reality of Indian Muslims, at least in the 19th century. India still was an intact nation with her culture, belief system, and the idea of acceptance for all sects and faiths. Okay, and at that time, the Akhand Bharat, it was the same size as the Western Europe, and Islam was neither the pioneer of social equality, because at that time the native Pasmanda Muslims were excluded from entering mosques or from eating in the same row with the Asrafi Muslims. Again, British historians are quoting this. And nor were they practicing monotheism, right? Because at that time, they would make offerings to the local Hindu deities, work as an integral part of the Shirk ecosystem. So some of the Muslims were taking care of temples with utmost devotion. Okay. So that was the reality of the India in 1880s. Okay, and then the Muslims, if their religion was part of their identity at all, were as diverse as the Hindus in terms of beliefs, language, dietary habits, and they were scattered across the subcontinent as huge as Western Europe, right? Other than the religious identity, it was difficult to find any connection between a tiller among the Moplas or the descendant of Mughal Ashrafs in the northwestern provinces or a Muslim advocate in Calcutta. The nationhood of India was still defined in terms of its cultural and civilizational values and not in terms of Abrahamic binaries that the British Ashraf nexus was sowing in the soil. Okay, so basically, this was a project by the British and the Ashrafs to create, to sort of control the native Pasmanda Muslims, so that they don't come to street um, with truly secular demands, and they don't start to side with the Congress. And obviously, अगर कांग्रेस का पावर वहाँ ज्यादा हो जाएगा, then Congress will start to press the British. It was not in the favor of British, so they started to dissuade the Muslims from joining Congress. Okay, and then Lord Mayo, who got assassinated, I think, in 1770s. So Lord Mayo had recognized months before his assassination that Muslims of India formed a distinctively dangerous class. So I'm just setting another pretext, right? Ki why British are colluding with the Ashrafs. Because Lord Mayo said that okay, Muslims are distinctively dangerous, and furthermore, the Muslim narrative was mainly driven by a few ruling elites or the Ashrafs in certain areas of India. These ashrafs had minimal correlation either with the geographical locations or living conditions or the level of educations of the native Pasmanda Muslims. The natives were kept poor and uneducated for centuries by the Ashrafis who ruled, while the Ashrafs themselves had a considerably better lifestyle and higher level of education. Yet, these Ashrafs still held the power to agitate native Pasmanda Muslims and set them on the streets to create chaos. The British were well aware of this religious revivalism attempted by the Ashrafs, and there was a British historian P. Hardy who is writing, quote, neither party, British or the Ashraf, however, mistook the coquetry of courtship for real affection. Even Sir Sayyid Ahmed Khan, as his private letters show, never forgot that the British were rebels against God. Okay, वो मुनाफिक हैं. The the British never weakened in their conviction that Muslims believed themselves created to rule, and that Muslim discontent was more to be feared than any other in India, right? Because Muslims are okay, unquote. And so, why? Because Muslims are inherently supremacist. They think that they are born to rule India, and that's why they were fundamentally at clash with the British because both wanted to rule India, right? At that point. So then how British tried to tackle that? So P. Hardy further comments here that so-called the Muslim issues raised to the British by Sayyid Ahmed Khan who was anyway loyal to the British. He was just taking these agitative points of the Muslims, of the Ashrafs, to the British in a very civilized manner. So Sayyid Ahmed Khan were mostly the issues of the comfortable and educated Ashrafs, and not of all Muslims, no matter how much Sayyid intended to portray himself as a mujtahid or whose ijtihad would be accepted by the whole Muslim community. However, just by initiating the dialogues with the British on such issues, Sayyid Ahmed Khan and his fellow Ashrafs gradually created a sense that Muslims are a great self-determining all Indian association, at least from the perspective of religion. Right? When Sayyid Ahmed Khan started to sort of send these sort of requests and letters representing ki he's the representative of all Indian Muslims. It started to gradually consolidate the Muslims across the different part of Indian subcontinent. And then in the 1870s and 1880s, Britain was intruding into the Muslim world as a colonizing power. So, for example, Britain's intervention in the defense of the Ottoman Empire against Russia, the acquisition of Cyprus, and the political involvement in Egypt established Britain as a power that was deciding the fortune of the Muslim world at that time. So some British statesmen started to depict this the British Empire in India as a Mohammedan power in this jugglery of global polity, right? Because British were afraid कि because of their intervention in the Muslim polity around the globe, the Muslims in India may be agitated. So they started to throw the narrative ki the British power in India is actually Mohammedan power. Okay. Conversely, the educated elite Muslims, the Ashrafs of India, also started to take interest around this time in 1870s in the pan-Muslim politics around the world under the occupation of the British. In May 1877, uh, Lord Lytton, I guess, wrote a letter to Salisbury, then Secretary of the State of India, and this letter actually illustrate in a very fundamental way the novel realization of the British that they needed to grow a very nice friendship with the staffs. Okay. And Lytton is commenting here, quote, "It is my strong impression that at the present moment, the lives of all your officers and the European subjects in India mainly depend on the course of your Eastern policy and its freedom for all appearances of subservience to Russia. There is no getting over the fact that the British Empire is a Mohammedan power, and then it entirely depends upon the policy of our Majesty's government whether the sentiment of our Mohammedan subjects is to be an immense security or an immense danger to us." Right. So basically, here um, Lord Lytton is commenting ki we have to form a like cordial friendship with the Ashrafs because either Muslim will be with us or they will be against us. So we have to handle this very carefully. And this was basically the origin of this Indian Mohammedan bugaboo in British foreign policy. And Lytton was elevated by the Viceroy of India, from being a novelist into a writer of thrillers. By now, the British had thoroughly studied political Islam and had also formed a nexus with the Ashraf. So gradually now, the British are starting to form the British Ashrafi nexus to rule the Hindus and the native Pasmanda Muslims of India. Okay. So, and this disguised sort of preference for the Ashrafs, they got really accelerated soon after Duffin landed in India as viceroy. It was decided by the British Indian government that they would present the Muslim polity as the counterweights before the emerging Hindu political class. Duffin would play this with some Machiavellian cunningness to set the Hindus, the Muslim against the Hindus. And in this way, what they wanted to do was basically to dissuade the Muslims from joining Congress. Okay. So, for example, this guy, Lord Dufferin, he expressed his liveliest sympathy for Muslims, and he was saying, "Ki I am in the favor of the Muslims starting political dialogues." Okay, so he said that, and then he is saying, and he conspired to dissuade the Ashraf leaders from joining the 1887 National Conference of Indian National Congress. Okay, and the Indian press, the Desi Swadeshi press, so to say, they started to call out Lord Dufferin for this mischief of sort of creating the divide between Hindu and Muslim. So Indian press started to write about it. Ki it is very dangerous. And for the first time, Indian press was sort of right in sort of predicting, right, the future of India if the British actually take up this policy. But then Dufferin denied all such allegations. Again, in Machiavellian style, he gave a few more confusing statements in March 1888. And I'm going to quote one of these. Quote, God forbid. So this is Lord Dufferin saying, quote, "God forbid that the British government should ever seek to maintain its rule in India by fomenting race hatreds among its subjects. Its antecedents, its strength, its self-confidence, and its dignity will forever render a recourse to such expedients unnecessary and impossible." So for the first time now, British is saying ki, listen, there are racial issues in India, but we are not going to foment hatred by adopting racial policies. So they are now gradually starting to utter ki there exists some sort of a national divide. There exist two nations within India, but it is not that we are going to favor one against the other. So this, just by saying this, right, in Calcutta Town Hall, Duffin seeded the idea that there were some divisions in Indian society that could be exploited to the advantage of the British Raj. So he said that, hey, I mean, I know there are things, but I'm not going to do anything about it. But then he simultaneously sent the message to Indian ICS officers. I mean, Indian in the sense the British ICS officers who were ruling India, right? So the message was loud and clear that exploit this division. Okay. Now, Dufferin's antipathy towards the Congress and sympathy for the Ashrafs gradually grew over time. He was vocal on dismissing the possibility of Congress becoming a union of all political classes in India. So they did not want the Congress to sort of become all powerful, and that's why they started the appeasement of the Ashrafs, native princes, and the local landlords, the zamindars. Okay, this seemed a more convenient way to keep the status quo than bringing the educated modern Indians into the power structure. So the here the logic of lot, because they didn't know कि ये जो टू नेशन थियरी है इतना काम कर जाएगा. So they started another policy which was like हम लोग एक काम करते हैं, कांग्रेस अपने आप में बात कर रहे हैं, ठीक है, वो तो सेफ्टी वाल्व है, बट हम लोग क्या करते हैं, हम लोग जमींदार और जो नेटिव प्रिंसेस है उनसे कम्युनिकेशन बढ़ाते हैं, और इसके थ्रू क्या करेंगे, हम इंडिया पे राज करेंगे और जो कांग्रेस है उनको साइड लाइन कर देंगे. Now, then what was happening? But then the problem that was coming was that anyway the Hindus were getting politically united, which was anyway anyway it was against the agenda of the British, since that would undermine the relevance or justification of British rule in India. तो लोग कहने लगे कि तुम लोगों को तो रहने की जरूरत नहीं है, हम लोगों के पास इंडियन नेशनल कांग्रेस है, अलग इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं, एजुकेशन है, तो हम लोग अपने आप देश चला लेंगे. So again, British needed to create a narrative. This needed a justification to rule India. Right. So and in this context, during a discussion with Lord Ripon in 1882, an officer in Punjab suggested to him that the division of Indian sociopolity should not be along the line of religions, castes, or classes, and not along the line of opinions and geographical areas. In this regard, the request from the upper class Ashrafi Muslims received special attention from a section of British officials to announce that the Muslims of India, as one single member of the body politic, standing as a solid pillar against the nationalist narrative of Indian National Congress. Right? So, यहाँ पे बेसिकली पंजाब का एक ऑफिसर था, ही स्टार्टेड टू से दैट इफ वी वांटेड टू डिवाइड एंड कॉन्क्वेर, तो उसके लिए सोशियो पॉलिटी में ये मतलब जियोग्राफिकली तोड़ के, मतलब तब क्या था, अलग अंग्रेजों ने अलग अलग एम्पायर ऑक्यूपाई किया था. सिख एम्पायर हो गया, बंगाल हो गया, यूनाइटेड प्रोविंस हो गया, मराठा से लिया, फिर कर्नाटक में गया, फिर निजाम को नीचे लाया, है ना. एंड अंग्रेज के दिमाग में तब क्या था कि इनको जियोग्राफिकल एरिया के हिसाब से अलग रखेंगे. बट दिस द जीनियस ऑफ दिस गाय, सम ऑफिसर इन पंजाब वाज रियलाइजिंग दैट नहीं, ऐसे नहीं होगा. इफ यू वांट टू क्रिएट डिवीजन along the religious line and the caste line. एंड इसके बाद से राइट जो डैमेज चालू हुआ उसे ना कांग्रेस रोक पाया, ना कोई हिंदू पॉलिटी रोक पाया. Okay, so this is how the British and the Ashraffs joined uh, hand hands to create a division in Indian society in the name of religious differences. And soon they discarded the idea that India is a civilizational nation. They had to take that line because accepting this glorious history and the civilizational values of India will allow very little space for the recognition of Abrahamic cultural supremacy as the guiding principle of the rulers, either the Ashrafs or the Angrez, right? Because you see, when you start to accept the narrative of a civilizational nation, नेशनहुड तो तब नया नया आइडिया था, चारों ओर यूरोप में स्पेसिफिकली फैल रहा था. सो इफ दे स्टार्टेड टू एक्सेप्ट इंडिया एज a civilizational nation, no, then they would have lost their own justification कि why Mughals or the British should sort of establish their supremacy and their rule over the Indian people, right? So that's why they had to discard the idea of India as a civilizational nation. and they are still doing it. Now even Congress has adopted that stand in modern 21st century. Anyway, so it was a novel experiment since the idea of nation got popularized in the West. It was novel in terms of introducing Abrahamic nationalism in Southeast Asia in the form of this whole Muslim League and all, to undermine the sacred geography and dharmic qualities of India as a prerequisite of this nation. Indians, for the first time in their history, regardless of whether they were Muslims or Hindus, moved their main focus from the Sanatani ways of assimilation and acceptance to the doctrine of divisions. And the British Ashrafi polity divided Hindus and Muslims by their apparent memories of subjecthood and masterhood. And the Congress was too weak to save Indians from this vile shadow of this dangerous doctrine. The common Indian was not too smart to realize this thing, and this loophole will soon prove fatal in the hands of future Ashrafi leaders of All India Muslim League in the ensuing decades. And it led to the partition in 1947, right? This was pretty much the background. And then what happened? Then now I'm gradually entering the chapter 11 of B.R. Ambedkar, communal aggression, right? So now what happened? See, the most unethical of all political means is non-use of any means. Uh, Matlab, if you are a political party, you have to have a political ideology, right? You cannot remain neutral or cannot say ki we are neutral and we are not in favor of any ideology. They don't mean anything, and that is the most unethical of all the means that a political party can adopt. So, and this was the sin of Indian National Congress. Since the inception of All India Muslim League, there was a clear separatist agenda by Aga Khan III, the first honorary president of the Muslim League, who boldly told the British that the Muslims must be considered a separate nation within India. Okay. And now, the alliance of BJP with Aga Khan. So they are, I have heard that they are in collusion with Aga Khan, their ecosystem, in order to restore famous monuments. They are taking money from Aga Khan to sort of restore the famous Islamic monuments across India. Anyway, so this is the BJP Aga Khan nexus. But Aga Khan III, the first honorary president, was the first of person from Muslim League who claimed that Muslim are separate nation within India. This is 1905. Savarkar's book was on 1857 as a War of Independence. I think it came in 1907. I mean, just imagine. They are saying that Savarkar introduced the idea of two nation theory. Whatever I have discussed so far has no Savarkar in it. Okay. Anyway, so then Muslim intelligentsia, after the announcement of Aga Khan III, emerging from the newly founded Aligarh Muslim University, who were serving the British Raj, later joined the separatist Muslim movement in mass. Okay, the proportion of the Muslims among the delegates in the Congress party had a steep fall. So it was in 1921, it was 11%. In 1923, it stooped down to 3.6%. While communalism was rampant in Indian politics, the roles that Congress leaders played were meek and predictable. So the main promise, for example, of Muslim League politics was to maintain a constant pressure on the centrist party, namely Congress. All that the Congress leaders could do around this time was to come up with communal negotiations. So what they did was communal negotiations, appeasement, and surrender to the aggressive communal demands in the name of centrist politics. Ashrafi leaders were right in at least one allegation, which was that the Congressi leaders did not study in depth the Islamic scriptures and Islamic history. It was essential to understand the core beliefs and the fundamental Mumin Kafir, pagan Abrahamics, Arbi Azmi, Darul Harb, Darul Islam, Azad, Zimmi binaries sketched out very clearly in Quran and Hadith to predict the locus of hardcore Islamist movement waged by the Muslim League. And no Congress leader studied these sort of binaries which are prescribed and in fact ordained in Muslim in Islamic scripture. But because of their ignorance of Islam, especially political Islam, Congress elites could not come up with a constructive narrative to counter the aggressive and separatist Muslim League politics. As an example, one Congressi narrative could have been that Islam is nothing more than forceful preservation of foreign Ashrafi hegemony in India and enslavement of poor people in the name of Arbi Allah. Hence, in the interest of a civilizational nation like India, this blind Arabization of Indian Muslims should be avoided at all cost. This narrative would have kept the Ashrafs and the British on the same ground as invaders and then exposed the nexus between these two ruling sections, the British and the Ashraf, right? But Congress did not study Islam, they did not study Christianity, they did not study sociopolity of these Abrahamic religions. So they had no clue about the dynamics of these foreign political ideology in the name of God, right? Anyway, so as a result, Congress failed to sort of capture the motive and the objective of Ashrafi class. And when the Ashrafi class knew that Congress is actually clueless in understanding this Muslim movement, they could move without any inhibition, right? Without any sort of active sort of resistance from these Congressi leaders. And as a result, now I'm going to tell you different acts and the different demands that Muslims started to impose on the British and on the nation of India. So, yes, so now let us try to understand the different phases of Muslim League demands and how it led to the partition of Indian polity and the partition of the nation of India. So the first act we are going to discuss is 1892 Indian Councils Act. Okay, so this act, Indian Councils Act 1892, was passed in the British Parliament to amend the pre-existing composition and function of the legislative councils in British India. Right, and then this act actually initiated the principle of representation in different places like in district boards, universities, municipalities, chambers of commerce. And through this act, basically zamindars and members in these sort of district boards or university or municipalities, they got the authorization to recommend members to the provincial councils, right? Although it dealt with the principle of nomination and not the principle of election, because only these sort of few elite members could send their representatives. So it was not an election actually, right? But anyway, it acknowledged it. This act for the first time in India acknowledged a separate representation of Muslims in the political constitution, and it introduced stealthily by mentioning Muslims as a class to be provided representation, right? So for the first time, they what they could do by segregating the Muslim interest from the common national interest, and then they by giving the separate representation of Muslims to India, they sort of first separated the Muslim interest, and sort of started to fuel the communal politics right from 1892. Yeah, it was in all probability proposed and implemented by Lord Duffin to deter the native Pasmanda Muslim community from joining the Congress. Right. So the idea was ki don't join the Congress. Anyway, you are getting representation, political representation. So don't go with those Bangali Babus or Ashrafi Babus, Bangali Babus or the Congressi Babus, because you are not going to gain anything out of it. This act did not give the Muslim community a fixed number of seats, but just the right to separate representation. Nevertheless, the Ashraf community fully appreciated the importance of this reform for the survival of their separatist politics. So, you have to understand in this context one important thing that after the demise of Aurangzeb, right? And Aurangzeb died in the Deccan like a dog, pretty much, right? Well, I mean, even dogs get a more dignified death than Aurangzeb. But anyway, the point is that when Aurangzeb died in 1707 in the Deccan, you have to understand that the Delhi Sultanate, the Mughal Sultanate, the throne was sort of emperorless for a few days, right? I think after Aurangzeb, something named Akbar II, I guess, became the ruler, but either he died or he was, I think, killed. And so there was a power vacuum. And eventually, I mean, no one could fill up that vacuum in the Delhi Takht. Okay. And obviously, there were like Sikhs who were fighting. Then there were Marathas, obviously. There were Rajputs in Rajasthan. So, due to all this sort of united Hindu movement, ashrafs across the India, they overall started to lose their importance in political space. So, I mean, from 1707 till 1857, when this guy, Bahadur Shah Jafar, he got dethroned, right, and was exiled. The Muslim political class, the Ashraf, they literally became powerless. They did not have any voice in Indian politics. But after that, this Indian Council Act in 1892 that for the first time brought back Ashrafs in the political representation of India. So needless to say, they were very happy with this act, and they got encouraged, right? Because when they started to play the communal politics and they saw, okay, this is acting in their favor, they started to only accelerate it further. The second thing, in phase two, we are going to discuss something called the Indian Councils Act 1909. Okay, I think after almost 20 years. Um, Now, Lord Minto, the Viceroy of India, had received an Ashrafi delegation from the Muslim League in 1906, who advised him to prevent the implementation of any parliamentary system that would allow Hindus to permanently dominate the Muslim minority. The Muslim League demanded, I think, four things from Lord Minto. The first one was communal representation in accordance with their numerical strength, social position, and local influence on district and municipal boards. Okay, क्या जितनी आबादी उतना हक. So जितना आबादी उतना हक was the first demand of the Muslim League in 1906 to the British. Okay, jitna abadi utna hak. Second one is an assurance of Mohammedan representation on the governing bodies of universities. क्योंकि जो एजुकेशनल इकोसिस्टम है उस पर कब्जा करना जरूरी है, राइट? यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम अर्ली 1800 Hindu reform was at a very rampant pace, right? It was almost a Hindu renaissance that was going on. Obviously, it maybe, I mean, in all possibility, it started from Kolkata, the modern Hindu reform, right? And then it actually became a wildfire across the whole of India, and Hindus were sort of dismantling their कास्ट सिस्टम वॉट एवर एग्जिस्टेड, नॉट कास्ट लाइक द वॉट एवर जात पात का जो भी होता है डिस्क्रिमिनेशन. Hindus were actively working to sort of wipe those discrimination out. Various reformers were born who were also making the Hindu dharma who were taking it in the very progressive directions, right? And then Hindus started to establish various universities, schools for the woman and girl child. And so these things were going on. They started to participate in the modern medical practices, and it started to sort of create some sort of phobia. This was the real Hindu phobia among the Ashrafs. This is Hindu phobia actually. कि they started to become afraid कि हिंदू इस तरह से अगर प्रोग्रेसिव होते रहे तो वो सारे जैसे एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट पे कब्जा करके रखे हैं, उसका सुधार चाहिए. सुधार कैसे चाहिए कि जबरदस्ती, कि एन एश्योरेंस ऑफ मुस्लिम रिप्रेजेंटेशन इन द गवर्निंग बॉडीज ऑफ यूनिवर्सिटीज. ऐसा नहीं कि पढ़ाएंगे बच्चा ये करें, नहीं. जो डिसाइड करता है यूनिवर्सिटी का पॉलिसी, वहां पे हमें जाके बैठना है, राइट? जस्ट बिकॉज वी आर मुस्लिम and we are a different nation. Point C, communal representation of communal representation on provincial councils, election being by special electoral colleges composed of the Mohammedan landlords, lawyers, merchants, and representatives of other important interests, university graduates of a certain standing, and members of district and municipal boards, right? कि जो भी स्पेशल जगह है, जैसे प्रोविंशियल काउंसिल हो गया, वहां पे हमें कम्युनल रिप्रेजेंटेशन चाहिए. व्हाई? बिकॉज वी आर मुस्लिम. नॉट ऑन द बेस्ड ऑफ ऑन नॉट ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ मेरिट, but on the basis of communal politics. Point 4, the number of Mohammedan representatives in the Imperial Legislative Council should not depend on their numerical strength, and Mohammedans should never be in an ineffective minority. They should be elected as far as possible, as opposed to being nominated. Election being by the special Mohammedan colleges composed of landowners, lawyers, merchants, members of provincial council, फेलोज ऑफ यूनिवर्सिटीज एटसेट्रा. तो जो इंपीरियल लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल है, जहां से पूरा ये सब लॉ वॉ बन के आता है, वहां पे हमें मुस्लिम रिप्रेजेंटेटिव चाहिए. नॉट ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ की न्यूमेरिकल स्ट्रेंथ, क्योंकि वहां पे वोटिंग वोटिंग होता है कि कौन सा लॉ पास होगा. तो वहां पे बोल रहे हैं कि हमें लगभग इक्वल, मतलब बिकॉज वी आर डिफरेंट नेशन, वी हैव आवर ओन स्पेसिफिक इंटरेस्ट. तो इंपीरियल लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल पे हमारा जो रिप्रेजेंटेशन है, दैट शुड नॉट डिपेंड ऑन द न्यूमेरिकल स्ट्रेंथ, and it should not make Musalmans an effective and an ineffective minority. Okay, so these were the four sort of demands of our Muslim League, All India Muslim League, in 1906. It was sent to, I think, Lord Minto, and then the British Raj was readily accepted these demands. Okay, why? Because the British Raj, they were also seeking a route of lesser evil that would give concessions of representation in the provincial and imperial legislature, but to dilute the ability of Indians to exercise control on the assemblies. You have to understand that in the assemblies, if the British are starting to give ample representation to all Indians, and if Indians are getting united in those councils, in on the basis of national interest, if all of them are getting united, then it will be a problem for the British, right? Because the number matters in those councils. So then the British started to give this separate representation to Muslims, Hindus, and started to create conflicting interest among these sort of different council members, so that they would not need to worry about Indians getting united on national interest, which is still a problem today, right? You see, these problems were created cunningly by the British, and they still exist in our society and in our legislative councils everywhere, in our parliament. Anyway, so a separate electorate was announced with seats reserved for the Muslims, in which only Muslims would be polled. Muslims were granted the right to elect their representatives, the right to vote in general electorates as well, and the right to weightage in representations. So फिर सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट खड़ा हो गया. सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट में सीट्स रिजर्व हो गया ओनली फॉर द मुस्लिम. और वो कैसे वो सिलेक्टेड होंगे? बाय पोलिंग ओनली मुस्लिम्स. ओके, so this way basically they vertically split the Hindus and Muslims. और ये शायद एक रीजन है जहां से मुस्लिम घेटो हो गया या फिर हिंदू स्लम्स ये सब पैदा होना चालू हुआ. ठीक है. Now in phase 3, in October 1916, I guess, October 1916, right? So in phase 3, a memorandum on constitutional reform, October 1916. So Minto's 1909 Act was applied in all provinces except two. In Punjab, this act was deemed unnecessary, and in the central provinces, it was not applied because of the absence of a legislative council. Now, in October 1916, 19 members of the Imperial Legislative Council presented a memorandum to the Viceroy asking for a fresh reforms in the constitution. ठीक है, तो बेसिकली इंपीरियल लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल अब सामने आया, बोला कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में सुधार लाना है तो सजेस्ट करो कुछ कुछ चीजें. And here the Muslim League took this opportunity to come up with even more communal demands, right? Point one, extending the principle of separate representation to Punjab and central provinces. Point B, fixing the numerical strength of the Muslim representatives in the provincial and imperial legislative councils. Point C, providing Muslims safeguards against any and every legislation that adversely affects Muslims, their religion, and religious usages. मतलब कि ब्लास्फेमी लॉ लाओ, है ना. तुम्हारे इंडिया में ब्लास्फेमी लॉ नहीं है, इसलिए गुस्ताखी चल रहा है, प्रॉफिट के नाम पे प्रॉफिट को गाली दिया जा रहा है, या फिर इस्लाम को क्रिटिसाइज किया जा रहा है, एंड दीज आर बैड. तो एंड दीज आर एक्चुअली अगेंस्ट द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ द मुस्लिम, सो ब्लास्फेमी लॉ लाओ, ये सब चीजें. So these are the three demands by the Muslim League, and these demands came together with the Lucknow Pact 1916, in which Muslims negotiated with the Hindus on 2 points. The first clause shows the fear and cowardice of the Congress leaders, while the second clause shows myopic stupidity. So Lucknow Pact 1916 में क्या हुआ, हिंदू मुस्लिम के बीच हुआ, मतलब कांग्रेस मुस्लिम लीग के बीच हुआ. एंड व्हाट आर द 2 पॉइंट? फर्स्ट पॉइंट, नो बिल nor any clause thereof, nor a resolution introduced by a non-official affecting one or the other community shall be proceeded with if three-fourths of the members of that community in the particular council, imperial or provincial, oppose the bill or any clause thereof, or the resolution. Second point, one third of the Indian elected members should be Mohammedans, elected by separate electorates in the several provinces in the proportion as nearly as might be in which they were represented on the provincial legislative councils by separate Mohammedan electorates. वन थर्ड क्यों? क्यों उस टाइम पे इंडिया का ओवरऑल पॉपुलेशन का वन थर्ड मुस्लिम, तो इसलिए जितना आबादी उतना हक, तो इसलिए उस हिसाब से सेपरेट इलेक्टोरेट बना देगा. ये कांग्रेस ने एग्री कर लिया, ठीक है. और ये जो वन थर्ड है, इसका एक सिग्निफिकेंस है इन द इस्लामिक स्क्रिप्चर. वो क्या है? उनका जो बड़ी किताब है जो आसमान से आया है, उसमें ये लिखा गया है कि अगर तुम, पहले ये लिखा गया था कि एक मुमिन 10 काफिर पे भारी है, ठीक है. सो देन द आइडिया वाज कि इफ यू आर 9% ऑफ अ गिवन पॉपुलेशन, यू स्टार्ट द फिजिकल जिहाद. बट उसके बाद सारे जो जिहादी थे वो डर गए, तो फिर अल्लाह ने ऊपर से और एक उसके उसको फटाक से सुधार कर दिया, और अल्लाह ने एक नया आयत भेजा कि नहीं, एक जो मुस्लिम है वो 2 काफिर पे भारी है. विच मीन कि अगर कोई नेशन का 33% इस्लाम हो जाए, तो उस मोमेंट पे फिजिकल जिहाद चालू करना है. ओके, सो दैट्स व्हाई वन थर्ड इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट नंबर in the Islamic context. So here, because one third of India's population was Musalman, they started to grow this sort of jihadi attitude without any shame. Anyway, तो पानी था क्या? पानी नहीं है, चलो. Anyway, I go on. Um,
No, no, you gave a glass of water, so I'll
अरे
share.
कोई नहीं, कोई
Go
नहीं,
and
खींचते हैं थोड़ा. इट इज an important point. We are sort of
go ahead.
arriving at a climax. तो हाँ, both clauses on the of the agreement were accepted by the government and embodied in the Government of India Act 1919. Under the Lucknow Pact, Muslims got a weightage in representation in the council far in excess of even what was allotted by the government in 1909. The ratio of percentage of Muslim seats compared to the Muslim population percentage was mostly greater than 100%. In the central provinces, it was 349%. In Madras, it was 230. So what number I'm quoting? So let's say there is some percentage of Musalman, and then the number of Muslim seats allotted, right? So if let's say the population is one, in the unit of let's say some population, then the number of seats that were allotted would be let's say three, four. It was certainly greater than one, right? So the ratio of the percentage of Muslim seats compared to the Muslim population percentage was mostly greater than 100% in almost all provinces. In the central provinces, it was 349%. In Madras, it was 231%. In Bihar and Odisha, it was 238%. In Bombay, it was 163%. In Punjab, it was 91%. In the United Provinces, it was 214%. And in Bengal, it was 76%. And so this was, you have to remember, it was in 1919, right? Which was in the context, in the historical context, when the First World War has ended, the Ottoman Empire has been defeated and being disintegrated, right? So the British knew कि ये जो Ottoman Empire, इनका जो खलीफा था, जो भी सुल्तान था, इनको जो हराया गया और गिराया गया, इसका जो इफेक्ट है वो इंडियन मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन पे आके गिरेगा. तो यहाँ ब्रिटिश ने भी अपीजमेंट कर दिया, है ना? So this was indeed another big victory for the communal stuff politics, which made them even more daring to demand more. Now we are going to discuss the phase 4 of Muslim League and their demand, which is Simon Commission and Jinnah's 15 points in 1927. So, when the British government announced the Simon Commission in 1927 to make further reforms in the Indian constitution, various Muslim institutions and parties such as Muslim League, the All India Muslim Conference, Jamiatul Ulema Hind, the Khilafat Conference, the All Parties Muslim Conference, so many institutions, they all came up with more demands. Muhammad Ali Jinnah formulated almost 15 points. Sorry, and let me discuss them one by one. The famous 15 points of Jinnah in 1927. The first point was point one: federal system will with residuary power vested in the provinces. Second point: uniform measure of autonomy to all provinces. Point three: reconstituting legislatures in the country and the elected bodies on the principles of adequate and effective representative representation of minorities in every province without reducing the majority of any province to a minority or even equality. Okay. Let me read that again. So, point three was reconstituting legislatures in the country and elected bodies on the principle of adequate and effective representation of minorities in every province without reducing the majority of any province to a minority or even equality. I'm going to discuss this point later. Point four: more than or identical to one third of Muslim representation in central legislatures. Point five: opening up the option of for any community at any time to abandon its separate electorates in favor of joint electorates. Point six: any territorial redistribution that might at any time be necessary should not in any way affect the Muslim majority in Punjab, Bengal and Northwest provinces. कि जहां पे मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी हो गया कोई प्रोविंस पे अगर, तो वो प्रोविंस तुम तोड़ नहीं सकते, और अगर तोड़ा तो वहां पे जो मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी है वो फैक्ट को तुम नेगेट नहीं कर सकते. Then point seven, I guess, yes, guaranteeing all communities full religious liberty, that is liberty of belief, worship, observances, propaganda, association and education. मतलब अगर इस्लाम फैलाने के लिए, अगर मतलब जो रिलीजियस लिबर्टी, अगर झूठ भी फैल रहा है, प्रोपागेंडा भी फैल रहा है बेस्ड ऑन बिलीफ, ये गवर्नमेंट को एक्सेप्ट करना होगा, राइट? गवर्नमेंट कैन नॉट डिनाई propagation of religion or cult even if they are based on falsehood. um, Point 8: no bill or resolution passing in any legislature or any other elected body if three-fourth of the members of any community oppose that bill. मतलब अगर मतलब इसमें भी हिंदू मुस्लिम ऐसे अलग अलग कम्युनिटी बनाया जाएगा। और यहाँ पे अगर मान लो मुस्लिम के 3/4 अगर कोई बिल का ये कर अपोज करे तो वो बिल पास नहीं होगा। ठीक है। फिर पॉइंट 9, सिंध should be separated from the Bombay presidency. This is such an important thing, which I'm going to discuss later. Just imagine how much uh, imagination was there in Jinnah's mind when he was proposing these things. Sindh should be separated from Bombay presidency. Right. And point 10, reforms in the Northwest Frontier Province and Baluchistan on same footing as other provinces. क्यों? वहाँ पे मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी हो गया है। Point 11, provinces to guarantee adequate share of Muslims in all the services of the state and in self-governing bodies. Right? कि जितने मुस्लिम्स हैं अगेन जितना आबादी उतना हक कि सारे जो गवर्निंग बॉडीज हैं वहाँ पे अगर 1/3 है तो वहाँ पे एटलीस्ट 1/3 उस इंस्टीट्यूशन में मुस्लिम भराया जाएगा। Then next point, adequate safeguard for the protection of Muslim religion, culture and personal law, and the promotion of Muslim education, language, religion, personal laws, Muslim charitable institutions, and for their share in grants in aid given by the state and by self-governing bodies. ठीक है। मतलब यहाँ पे मुस्लिम लीग ये सब डिमांड कर रहा है, वहां पे कांग्रेस अपना सेंट्रिस्ट डिमांड डाल के रखा है। फिर पॉइंट नंबर 13 आई गेस, नो कैबिनेट सेंट्रल और प्रोविंशियल विदाउट अ प्रोपोर्शन ऑफ मुस्लिम मिनिस्टर्स ऑफ एटलीस्ट 1/3। ठीक है। मतलब एटलीस्ट अगर 1/3 मुस्लिम मिनिस्टर ना मिला तो कोई कैबिनेट फॉर्म नहीं हो सकता। Point 14, no change in the constitution by the central legislature except with the concurrence of the states constitution constituting the Indian Federation. ठीक है। तो स्टेट बताएंगे कि क्या जोड़ना है क्या निकालना है, चाहे वो कोई भी स्टेट हो, और उसके हिसाब से इंडियन फेडरेशन काम करेगा लेजिस्लेचर में। And the 15 point says, as separate electorates were inevitable, the government pledging not to take away the right without their consent, so long as the Muslims are not satisfied that their rights and interests are safeguarded, they would not consent to the establishment of joint electorates with or without condition. मतलब ये जो फेडरलिज्म है अगर कोई भी बन रहा है, that would not be established without the consent of the Muslims. Now, let's discuss these 15 points. I mean, these are legal points, and they may seem to you like very sort of abstract and obtuse, right? So let's discuss them, at least some of them, one by one. So among these 15 demands, 10 were old and retained in order to ensure that the hitherto gained advantage were retained intact. There were 5 new demands that were introduced to remove the weaknesses in the Muslim position. Point 1, the first one was the representation in proportion of Muslim majorities in Punjab and Bengal. And the motivation behind this was to establish the Muslim community in these two states from communal majority to a statutory majority. ओके कि नथिंग कैन बी चेंज्ड इन पंजाब एंड बंगाल, ताकि वो ग्रैब कर सके वहां पे पावर ग्रैब करके रख सके। ठीक है, तो ये सब तोड़ा नहीं जाएगा जगह। सेकेंड न्यू डिमांड वाज 1/3 रिप्रेजेंटेशन टू मुस्लिम्स इन बोथ सेंट्रल एंड प्रोविंशियल कैबिनेट्स, which was a considerably aggressive proposal considering the Muslim percentage of population in most provinces were less than 1/3। ठीक है, जब 1/3 रिप्रेजेंटेशन पूछ रहे हैं तो 1/3 ज्यादातर राज्यों में नहीं है। So it was a very aggressive proposal. Then the third one was adequate representation of Muslims in all services. Then the fourth one was the separation of Sindh from the Bombay presidency and the elevation of the status of Balochistan and Northwest Frontier Province to self-governing provinces. The motivation behind this demand, in addition to the first one, of Punjab and Bengal thing, was to create 4 provinces in which Muslims would be in majority as compared to 6 provinces in which Hindus were in majority. The fifth new demand was the vesting of residuary powers in the provinces in the central government, the aim was to keep the Muslim provinces out of the grip of Hindu government at the center. Right? कि अगर कहीं पे मुस्लिम प्रोविंस बन रहा है ताकि हिंदू सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट से इनको कुछ कारनामे ना कर सके, तो उसको अलग करने के लिए ये वेस्टिंग ऑफ रेसिजुअरी पावर्स इन द प्रोविंसेस प्रपोज किया गया. इन स्पाइट ऑफ रिजेक्शन बाय द हिंदूज एंड सिख्स एंड इवन द साइमन कमीशन, the British government granted all these demands, both old and new of the Muslims. मतलब जितना आबादी उतना हक ग्रांट हो गया. ठीक है. इन 19 1935 1927 35 पे और आएगा. सॉरी. Now in the phase 5, Jinnah is getting even more aggressive. Jinnah's odious Ashrafi demands in 1938. So Hindus might have thought that the Muslim demands could not have crossed any further limits after the Lucknow Pact and after the demands of 1927, the 15 demands. But Hindus were gravely mistaken. In 1938, a few more brazenly communal demands of Jinnah were revealed. Okay. Point one, the 15 demands put forth by the Muslim League in 1929. Point two, withdrawal of all oppositions to the communal award by Congress. And these demands should not be labeled as negation of nationalism. ठीक है. मतलब कांग्रेस अगर अपोज कर रहा है कि कम्युनल रिवॉर्ड अवार्ड दिया जा रहा है इनको मुस्लिम लीग को, उसे विथड्रॉ करना होगा. Point three, fixing in the constitution the share of Muslims in the state services by statutory enactment. Point four, guaranteeing Muslim personal law and culture by statute. ठीक है. मुस्लिम पर्सनल लॉ की बात चालू होने लगा, जो अभी भी इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में चल रहा है पैरेलली, टू क्रिएट अ मुस्लिम स्टेट विद इन अ सोवरेन सेक्युलर स्टेट ऑफ इंडिया. Point five, Congress should use its moral pressure to enable the Muslims to gain possession of the Shahid Ganj Mosque, which was being contested between Sikhs and Muslims. तो जैसे राम मंदिर इशू मतलब चल रहा था बहुत दिनों से, वैसे ही आई थिंक ये लाहौर में था, ये लाहौर के पास था. एक शहीदगंज मॉस्क था जिसको लेके सिख और मुस्लिम के बीच डिस्प्यूट चल रहा था. आई थिंक ये कोई तो खालसा राज के टाइम में हुआ होगा कि इनको इन्होंने क्या किया, इनका एक गुरुद्वारा था उसको तोड़ के फिर मॉस्क बना दिया गया. बट उसके बाद से सिख लोगों ने छोड़ा नहीं अपना दावा. और that this place Shahidganj has a significance as well. I think कोई अपना सिख जो कोई प्रोमिनेंट लीडर या गुरु वहां पे शहीद हुए थे, तो ये उधर चल रहा था. ठीक है. मुस्लिम ने बोल रहे थे कि अपना कांग्रेस शुड use its moral pressure to enable the Muslims to gain possession of the Shahidganj mosque. Point 6, Muslims' right to azan and all religious ceremonies should not be obstructed in any way. मतलब अगर लाउड स्पीकर भी लग गया, उस टाइम पे शायद था नहीं तो मुझे पता नहीं, बट अगर ये सब चल रहा है, मुस्लिम कोई अगर मस्जिद के सामने से जा रहा है तो गाना नहीं गाना चाहिए, ये सब अगर हो जाए तो ये शुड नॉट बी ऑब्स्ट्रक्टेड. ठीक है. मतलब मुस्लिम अगर कहीं मस्जिद बना है वहाँ गाना वाना नहीं चलेगा. अजान अगर जोर से दे रहा है, चिल्ला रहा है, कुछ भी चल रहा है, उसे कोई रोकेगा नहीं. मुस्लिम फ्रीडम टू स्लॉटर काउज शुड नॉट बी फेटर्ड. मुस्लिम अगर गो हत्या करना चाहे तो वो मान लिया जाएगा. मतलब कांग्रेस विल एक्सेप्ट इट as a centrist policy. The territorial definition, next point, the territorial definition of all those provinces where Muslims are in majority should not be altered or readjusted. ठीक है. तो अगर कोई टेरिटरी बन गया है कि वहाँ मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी है, तो उसे तोड़ मरोड़ के कोई मतलब दूसरा टेरिटरी नहीं क्रिएट किया जा सकता है जहाँ मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी का जो सॉर्ट ऑफ स्टैटिस्टिक्स है वो ऑल्टर हो जाए. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, द वंदे मातरम सॉन्ग शुड बी कंप्लीटली गिवन अप. मतलब इंडिया के जो कॉन्शियसनेस है भारत का, उससे वंदे मातरम को मिटा देना होगा. establish Urdu as the national language, and statutory guarantee to not curtail the use of Urdu. उर्दू को नेशनल लैंग्वेज बनाया जाएगा. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, गवर्निंग मुस्लिम रिप्रेजेंटेशन इन द लोकल बॉडीज by the principles understanding the communal award, that is separate electorates and population strength. ठीक है. तो हाँ, मुस्लिम रिप्रेजेंटेशन लोकल बॉडीज में बढ़ाया जाएगा बाय द प्रिंसिपल्स अंडरलाइंग कम्युनल अवार्ड. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, चेंजिंग द ट्राई कलर फ्लैग और ऑल्टरनेटली गिविंग द फ्लैग ऑफ मुस्लिम लीग इक्वल इंपॉर्टेंस, कि दो निशान रहेगा, दो फ्लैग रहेगा, एक मुस्लिम लीग का और एक कांग्रेस का. Recognition of the Muslim League as the one authoritative and representative organization of Indian Muslim. इंडियन मुस्लिम नो मैटर, जैसे केरल में उस टाइम पे मैट्रिमोनियल लॉ चल रहा था, और मुस्लिम ऐसे शिरक करते थे, तो ये सब छोड़ के देयर विल बी वन organization, All India Muslim League, who will be representative, who will be the representative of pan India Muslims. Okay. And then formation of coalition ministries. क्यों? Because जहाँ पे मतलब इस्लाम डोमिनेंस में नहीं है, वहाँ पे coalition बनाओ. ठीक है. Basically the Makkah form of Islam, right? Secularism. Formation of coalition ministry, right? Um, okay, within 1 year, the Muslim League came up with one more substantial demand: 50% share in everything. This was in contrast to 1929 demand that a majority should not be reduced to any minority or equality. पहले वो लोग बोल रहे थे कि जहाँ पे मेजोरिटी बन चुका हो मेजोरिटी रहने दो. अभी बोल रहे नहीं, we want 50% share in everything. The Muslim League now claimed a higher degree of protection on the ground of their political importance. The Ashraf quality of these demands are reflected in the fact, sorry, that out of 68 million Muslims, 6.8 crore Muslims at that time, only 2.8 crore Muslims used to speak Urdu at that time. Urdu was considered a typical Ashrafi language. Ashraf leaders wanted to impose Urdu on 4 crore of Pasmanda Muslims as well as on 32 crore native Indians. Not only that, 50% share and disputes over the national flag established the two nation theory in its full quote unquote glory to confirm the identity of Pakistan or the Islamic Qawm as a separate and equal nation. So at that time, the Muslim League started to say that we are not only a separate nation, but we are also an equal nation. This indefinite expansion of Muslim political demands was put forward as part of a muhaida. Muhaida is basically contract between Hindus and Muslims. And if you listen to the Ashraf even now, they claim that constitution is not a commandment or any sort of moral set of articles for Indians. No, the Muslim Ashraf view the current Indian constitution as a muhaida, as a contract between Hindus and Muslims, as a contract between Kafirs and the Muslims. It does not hold any sacred value to Muslim. It is a muhaida. Anyway, so now the indefinite expansion of the Muslim political demands was put forward as part of a muhaida between Hindus and Muslims with random arbitration by the British, who seem to have become more and more soft, right, in their appeasement to the Muslims. मतलब जो भी इस मुस्लिम लीग अगर कोई भी डिमांड लेके जाता था, फटाफट वो जो अपना ब्रिटिश है वो मान लेते थे. So British were delighted in accommodating and fulfilling Muslim demands. In the 1946 provincial elections, the Indian Congress won 90% of Hindu seats, while the Muslim League that ran a blind campaign for Pakistan won 87% of Muslim votes. Despite winning 923 seats out of 1585, the Indian National Congress could not mend the inevitable. Pakistan, after the 1946 elections, was a certainty because it gathered 87% of Muslim votes across the Indian subcontinent. right? So this is basically our analysis of this chapter, the chapter 11 of Pakistan and the Partition of India by our famous B.R. Ambedkar, right? And obviously, matlab, in the modern context, B.R. Ambedkar is being elevated to the level of a god, but we are not reading the. I mean, one of the major sort of fallback of this Hindutva current modern 21st century Hindutva movement is that we have failed to sort of own B.R. Ambedkar and appropriate B.R. Ambedkar in our modern Hindutva politics. And gradually it is shifting to the Muslim and to the Congressi way of politics. And Congress means right now Congress is the new Muslim League, right? Because they are pretty much putting the same demands that we just discussed, right? I mean, 100 years later, Congress is the new Muslim League, and Congresses are putting the same demands from within Indian Parliament. It is Rahul Gandhi, जिसका पता ही नहीं है इसका कितने सुनने में तो आता है कि पता नहीं कितना पासपोर्ट है मोर ही प्रोबेबली हैज मोर देन वन पासपोर्ट ऐसा रूमर टूमर आता है द पॉइंट इज दिस गाय is basically driving the same kind of communal politics representative not even representative like the this sort of separate electorate जितना आबादी इतना same politics he is running so as if Rahul Gandhi in modern day is copying Jinnah. Why? Because he does not have any political imagination. He cannot do anything better. So just the way Jinnah was not the most popular leader in the pre-partition India, hence he tried to shift his focus and become communal, and started to claim that he is the representative of all India Muslims. The same way when Rahul Gandhi is being defeated again and again, he is starting to take the same sort of divisive sort of way to divide the Hindus in the name of Dalit and I don't know, like sovereign Dalit and whatever, started to elevate Ambedkar to the level of a god. And he's cunningly, these Congressi or the Muslim politics, they're hiding this book, Pakistan or the Partition of India by B.R. Ambedkar. And because this BJP side, who are probably the new Congress of Indian politics, they are very afraid to bring these discussions of B.R. Ambedkar on Islam. They are they are very afraid to put these things on the syllabus of CBSE, for example, टू डिस्कस कि भाई बी आर अम्बेडकर इस्लाम को लेके ये सब बोला ये बोल के गए हैं बी आर अम्बेडकर का ये चर्चा बीजेपी को रखना चाहिए टेक्स्ट बुक में ताकि बच्चे पढ़ सके और उन्हें पता चल सके कि भाई actually B.R. Ambedkar, what did he believe in? So anyway, I wanted to also in the context of whatever discussions that we did, right? So I said a pretext of this chapter, again chapter 11, Communal Aggression by B.R. Ambedkar. So we set a pretext. Then we discussed these sort of the main points from this chapter. And now I'm going to tell you a few sort of things in the conclusion, right? A few sort of addendum, so to say. Yeah, so the first point is that only Congress and Muslim League and no Hindu organization are either prescribed or accepted partition. Partition was a phenomenon which was agreed, signed by the Congress and Muslim League. It was not agreed and signed by any Hindu organization. So we have to be fearless in saying that we did not accept partition. No Hindu organization accepted partition. Only Congress and Muslim League accepted partition. Only Congress and Muslim League are responsible for India's partition. No Hindu is responsible for India's partition. No Hindu organization is responsible for Indian partition. And Congress does not and did not represent Hindu interest in this land. Okay, so you have to be very categorically confident in saying that no Hindu organization either prescribed or accepted partition. Neither B.R. Ambedkar, nor Savarkar, nor our Subhash Chandra Bose accepted or prescribed partition. Gandhi said that partition will be क्या मेरे पता नहीं बॉडी के ऊपर से तुम्हें जाके पार्टीशन करना, वट एवर, विल बी ओवर माई डेड बॉडीज. बट ही एक्सेप्टेड पार्टीशन. Gandhi accepted partition, and he was not dead. I mean, it was not like his dead body signed the accepted partition in this working committee meeting in Congress. He was alive when he agreed to partition. So it was only Congress and Muslim League who accepted partition. No Hindu accepted partition, and no Hindu organization accepted partition. Okay. Now, even for this part of history, in an effort to sort of bring and enforce symmetry in the narrative, right, secularism, the Ashrafi communist historians argue that there were people like Savarkar who were advocating and propagating the same two nation theory in Hindu intelligentsia. This logic does not stand tall when we consider the following points, along with the ever aggressive communal demands put forth by the Ashrafi politics. Right? First point, I'm just going to put forward the points to sort of say ki bhai, it's not like similar communal thing was happening in the Hindu side. Okay, why? Because point one, Hindu messiah in the Islamic theology. So, according to Islamic theology, Hindus are the worst kind of kafirs because they commit the gravest sin of shirk, which means associating partners with Allah by performing idolatry. So, shirk, because Hindus are mushrik, they perform shirk, they are the worst kind of kafirs. And in Islamic scripture, there is no maafi for committing shirk. Okay, there is no pardon from Allah for committing shirk. So Hindus are the worst kind of kafirs. There is no escape from hell, from Jahannam for Hindus. Islam accepts obedience to none but Allah. Quran 3.64, 31.27, and 22.73. Islam supposes that Hindus worship multiple gods and goddesses, many times in the form of idols, murtis, which is basically shirk. Because of this heinous sin, Hindus will not be forgiven. Quran 4.48, 4.116, and will be sent to hellfire. Quran 5.72. Dehumanization and hatred for the Hindus in Islamic scripture is not reciprocated in any of the Hindu scriptures. Not only that, Islamic theology gives a detailed template of how to completely annihilate pagans from a region to establish Islam there. The old template has been religiously followed down to a T and has been repeated in the Indian subcontinent to commit multiple Hindu Jati Vidwans. As an example, during the Mopla Jati Vidwans in 1921, people who were skinned alive were made to dig their graves before being slaughtered. This practice was started by the very founders of Islam during the rioting episode in Medina. Point two nation theory is the essential core of Quranic doctrine. Okay, point one was basically because Hindus are the worst creature. And then point two, I am saying that two nation theory is essential to any Abrahamic doctrine and in the Quranic doctrine. Islamic doctrine divides the whole world into Darul Islam, which is the house of Islam, where Islam is ruling, and the Darul Harb, which is the house of war. And apparently, Freedom at Midnight by Lapierre has been converted to an excellent series. Yeah, we'll have to watch it. That is also appropriated. There is no symmetry in the communal politics. Okay, and no matter, matlab, if any book is trying to sort of balance this narrative कि हिंदू भी communal थे मुस्लिम communal थे, it was a communal tension that created India Pakistan. No, it was Islamic theology that created Pakistan. Recently Shahla Rashid also commented on this कि Pakistan was created not on religious line, it was created on Islamic line. Okay, so it was not a communal politics, it was an Islamic politics that created Pakistan. There was no communal Hindu politics that was going on at that moment, and whatever communal Hindu politics going on at that moment were defensive Hindu politics and not any offensive Hindu politics that was working on at that time in India. And ever in the history of the world, Hindus are never communal. It is not there in any scripture, and Hindus can never be communal. Okay, whatever strategy Hindus adopt in the course of their lifetime or in any part of the history are basically defensive strategies, not to kill or convert any section of people where they are trying to migrate or whatever. They're ruling, for example. Anyway, so two nation theory is essential core of Quranic doctrine, as we know, right? Because Islam dictates that by their very existence, kafirs and zalims should attract punishment. There are further subcategories of kafirs such as mushrik, murtad. Mushrik is like polytheist, right? Jo murti pujak, for example. Murtad, which are apostates, the ex-Muslims. Mulhid, atheist, and munafiq, the agnostics. It is the duty of the Muslim to wipe out these kafirs from the world, to make the whole world Darul Islam. The motive of either spiritual or political Islam cannot escape this fundamental ambition. Hence, the essence of spiritual and political Islam is the two nation theory. It is the manifesto, the enduring theme that the Sufis and ulemas have uttered for centuries. These ashrafs of the 19th and 20th century have reiterated this for political gain. Any kind of assimilative or inclusive politics could do very little to dissuade the ashrafs from this divisive manifesto. Okay, so two nation theory is an Islamic doctrine. It is not a communal doctrine, it is not a Hindu doctrine. Point three, history of Hindu suppression and Hindu genocide by Ashrafi rulers. So, contrary to the Sarva Dharma Sambhav ideology of Hinduism, Islam is an exclusivist ideology, where the founders of Islam showed no mercy for polytheists. And in the then Arabia, the polytheists of Mecca were either to be slaughtered until they surrendered or had to be converted. And this was in contrast to the people of the books, Ali Kitab, like the Christian and the Jews, who could be kept alive as zimmis provided they agreed to pay jizya. So in the Islamic scripture, Christians and Jews, they could be saved from the slaughter if they agree to pay jizya. But Hindus and the mushriks have to be slaughtered. They cannot be kept alive. Okay? Not even by the promise of giving jizya. Anyway, so the Hindus are not Ahle Kitab. They are not people of the book. They have multiple books and even more gods. Hence, in the Sultanate period, the Sufis and the ulemas opined that Hindus could not be considered zimmis. And it was incumbent upon the Islamic State of India under the sultans to either kill or convert all the Hindus of India. Else, all Muslims who are part of this Islamic state would surely be thrown into hellfire. But Hindus were too large in numbers and were spread across every area of this vast subcontinent, so all of them could not be killed. Hence, the Islamic Sultanate, the Islamic state of the Delhi, they came up with this smart strategy कि चलो हिंदू पे भी थोड़ा जजिया लगा के उन्हें जीने देते हैं, है ना. अकबर ने हटाया था, अकबर रिमूव्ड इट after a long time, but फिर it was reintroduced by Aurangzeb. And this is the history of Islam in the subcontinent. This is the harmony that they created, okay, by ruling. Point four is political nexus of Ashraf and the British, which we already discussed. Doctrine of division and destruction essentially is the distinct expertise of All India Muslim League. So the non-negotiating, no compromising attitude of All India Muslim League was something that distinguished this organization from all other political entities of the subcontinent. At the root of this attitude was the message of Holy Quran itself, not to compromise when Islam is in power. Quran 47.35. Once the Muslim League sensed the acquiescence of the British to the Ashrafi power in undivided India, it took small and firm, bold communal steps. In 1930, during a speech to the All India Muslim League, Muhammad Iqbal argued that Islam is not merely about ethics or sunnat, it is also a kind of polity. Under Christianity, where religion has been displaced by the idea of nationhood with essentially non religious ethics and polity, Islam has never had a typical Islamic church to revolt against. This is because Islam is not a religion of solo spiritual experience or a private practice. As evident from the revelation of the Quran and the religious experiences of the Prophet, Islam is the individual experience of a social order. Hence, accepting Islam means signing on a set of legal concepts with civic significance. The religion of Islam is thus completely entangled with the logical system, the socio political order, and the set of ethics that it has historically created. From this, Iqbal opined, quote, the rejection of any of the one will eventually involve rejection of the other. Matlab, if you are Muslim, you cannot reject any part of Islam. Rejecting one part of Islam means rejecting all part of Islam. Iqbal perhaps had the apprehension that in an undivided India, Islam will be liberalized to the extent that it will face an existential threat like Christianity did in Europe. So he proposed that the Muslim majority provinces of the northwest India should be consolidated into a single Islamic state. This flawed Ashrafi supremacist logic quickly went down the spiral and rejuvenated a whole class of Hindu genocidal elements in the subcontinent, a part of which is still actively going on the soil of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Right? So this is basically doctrine of division that people like Iqbal or Ali Muhammad Ali Jinnah were sort of sowing on the seed of every Muslim mind. Now, point six is Savarkar's description and not prescription of two nation theory. So we hear a lot of things like Savarkar, Hindutavadi, separatist, ye wo. But Savarkar, if you read the book Hindutva, he did not prescribe any two nation theory. He merely described what was going on at that time. He did not particularly appreciate or commended the effort of the Muslim League or any Hindu organization to create division. He was just saying कि भाई ऐसा हो रहा है ठीक है. Savarkar did not prescribe two nations within India. He merely described it as it was historically perceived by the Ashraf and the British. Understanding and commenting on the two nation theory of India was necessary because it was a question of survive or perish for the Hindus. This is because the other nation, that is the Qawm of Islam, had a perennial mission to convert and kill all the Hindus in order to make India Darul Islam. Even after independence, unlike Muslim League, the Hindu Mahasabha or Savarkar never proposed that Muslim be treated as second grade citizens in their draft of proposals to be included in the constitution. ठीक है. हिंदू महासभा हो जाए सावरकर हो जाए, they advocated for equal right, they advocated for equal voting right, they did not say anything which was communal from any angle. Then point 7, Savarkar's idea of Hindu homeland in India being the Punya Bhumi of Hindus. Savarkar's idea of Bharat envisaged India as Pitrabhumi and Punyabhumi of Hindus. It derived the definition of Hindus from the two attributes of ancestry and faith. This definition of Hindu was equally valid even for Pasmandas, for whom India was an ancestral land. In their faith and belief, India and her spiritual heritage was as much theirs as it was for the unconverted Hindus. Historians such as Mari Titus mentioned that the native Pasmanda Muslims were amazingly unorthodox and extremely liberal to the extent that they must have shocked the Ashrafs like Aurangzeb. Bengali Muslim poets like Karam Ali and Karim Allah were Radhakrishna Bhakts and wrote hymns of goddess Kali. The Malkana community of Agra, Itawa, and Mathura were of Rajput, Bania, and Jat descent, and they were reluctant to call themselves Muslims. Their names continued to be Hindu names. They worshipped at Hindu temples and they used the salutation Ram Ram, which is still used by a large faction of Indian Muslims. The Memons of Kutch did not associate with Muslims and they were vegetarian. I mean, they ate no meat, did not practice circumcision, and worshipped Hindu Tridev, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwar. Hence, the Pasmandas of India are by ancestry, by culture, by belief, and by faith were Hindu. For them, India was both Pitrabhumi as well as Punya Bhumi. The next point, Ashraf's disinterest in unifying politics of Congress decline in the number of Ashrafi leaders in the Congress. The Congress tried to bind together all Indians irrespective of their faith, but this narrative was not appealing enough for the Ashrafi leaders. As mentioned before, the Congress saw a steep fall in the Muslim leaders from 11% in 1921 to 3.6% in 1923. Even in 1946 provincial election, the Muslim League fought with the agenda of Pakistan and not on any inclusive ideology or thought. So please spare us from the blame that were communal and Muslims were also communal. And this communal mentality, this disharmony from both the side created Pakistan. No, Hindus are not communal, neither Hindu doctrine nor Hindu Shastra nor Hindu society, nor any Hindu individual were communal. That include Vinayak Damodar Savarkar. It was Ashrafs and the British who were communal and who colluded in order to divide, destroy, partition, and genocide India in the name of Islam and Christianity, and with the ulterior motive to re-establish their Abrahamic supremacy on a pagan land. Thank you.
Thank you, Bijit. I think this was one of the best programs that we have had in our series that we have conducted recently.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. Like I was listening to it and also taking care of chat. So, okay, so people who want to ask questions, I have shortlisted four questions as of now. If you have any questions, just put hash ASK and ask your question. We'll take those questions. And to the last point, I don't have much to say. But this contention of Hindu Mahasabha as a communal organization. So I have actually put that Hindu Mahasabha draft constitution, which they had made for Bharat. Here the mentions the rights of non-Hindu minorities. When once the Hindu Mahasabha not only accepts but maintains the principle of one man, one vote, which was antithetical to the Muslim League proposition of
Exactly.
one man, multiple vote. The public services to go by merit alone added to the fundamental rights and obligations to be shared by all citizens alike, irrespective of any distinction of race or religion. Any further mention of minority rights is on principle not only unnecessary but self-contradictory because they are saying that in the eyes of the government or the administration, every individual has the same rights. So there is no concept of majority and minority at all.
Right. Yep.
But as practical politics require it, and as the Hindu Sangatanists want to relieve our non-Hindu countrymen of even a cause of suspicion, we are prepared to emphasize that the legitimate rights of minorities with regard to their religion, culture, language will be expressly guaranteed. No, on one condition only, that the equal rights of the majority also must not in any case be encroached upon or abrogated. Every minority may have separate schools to train up their children in their own tongue, the, their own religious or cultural institutions, and can receive government help also for these, but always in proportion to the taxes they pay into the common exchequer. The same principle must, of course, hold good in case of majority too. So a lot of
Exactly.
people here in the chat as well, like this is a being narrative done for 100 years, more than 100 years, that Hindus are a kind of communal, but people fail to read, people fail to use common sense, and what's been written and said, documented. So
Right.
read and then talk about it. Yeah.
As
So
Hindus, we should never accept this blame.
no, no,
Ki
we don't
communal
accept it,
disharmony.
but
No. Communalism
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Communalism is a Muslim phenomena, it's a Christian phenomena, it's an Abrahamic phenomena. Hindus should never say कि भाई communalism चल रहा है देश में हिंदू मुस्लिम. No, Hindus are not responsible. Hindus are never responsible for it. ये सब फालतू. एक तरफ सेकुलरिज्म दिखाओगे जब मतलब थोड़ा बहुत हिंदुओं से डर पैदा हो जाएगा, और जब हिंदुओं का डर नहीं रहेगा तब जितनी आबादी उतना हक बोल के हिंदुओं को तोड़ोगे. मतलब वेयर इज द प्रोपोर्शन भाई.
So So go ahead and read first. Okay. Don't be an illiterate person who says something without any context. So this is the speech and the content which I am providing. Go and read it. Just don't show your illiterateness on the chat by saying all those things. Go and read. I am quoting. I'll give this on the cat itself, where I have got this. Yeah, okay.
Right,
So
right.
we will take a few questions. We'll take
I
a
mean,
few
these guys
questions.
who are commenting like that are academophobic.
I don't know who they are. I don't know.
They should come
Can
and
they
join us.
be
I mean,
right?
they should come live and debate with us if they have any guts.
No, no,
I don't
they
know,
have not
maybe.
read. It takes 2 minutes of search to find this documentation. If they can't do this, then we don't know anything about it.
एंड अगर डर रहे हैं तो
Okay.
ये डर अच्छा है. ये डर अच्छा लगा हमें. डरो. मतलब आई नो यू आर अफ्रेड ऑफ रीजन, बट या ये डर अच्छा है.
Common sense is quite uncommon in times.
कॉमन सेंस नहीं, ये रैशनलिटी है. दीज गाइज व्हाट एवर डॉक्ट्रिन दे आर फॉलोइंग, उसके खिलाफ जाके पार्टी ऑफिस में बोले या फिर चर्च में या मस्जिद में जाके बोले, जिंदा लौट के दिखाए, फिर उसके बाद हमें आके ज्ञान देते हैं.
Yeah, okay. So we'll take a few questions. So the first question from Shoptorshi. Aga Khan wasn't the person who made claims about Hindu gods being prophets of Allah and wrote books on them.
हाँ, ये हुआ था. उससे पहले दाराशिकों ने किया था ना. दाराशिकों ने एक उपनिषद क्रिएट करने की कोशिश किया, जिसे अल्लोपनिषद कहते हैं, अल्लाह उपनिषद. और उसमें दिखाने की कोशिश किया कि जो कल्कि है वो बेसिकली जो प्रॉफिट मोहम्मद जो है वो एक्चुअली कल्कि है. दाराशी को ये दिखाने की कोशिश किया. औरंगजेब ने उसे फिर उसके लिए ही तो पनिश किया ना, बीएड किया. अब बीजेपी और आगा खान का टाइप है भाई. आगा खान का शायद फंडिंग मिलता है बीजेपी को. सो देयर यू गो.
Yeah, okay. So second question. Second question is from Retrowave. Why did we ever different personal law act separately for Hindus and Muslims and Christians?
इट्स अ वेरी गुड
I think it
क्वेश्चन.
was.
See, the moment when you start to deny the existence and the reality of Bharat as a civilization nation, you start to behave this way. You start to implement different personal law. You start to say that India is a union of state and it is not a nation. You start saying ki Waqf board is a reality of India. You start saying ki Muslims ruled India for 1,000 years. All these narratives can be sort of damaged and destroyed by the single fact that India was a civilization nation. मतलब दिल्ली में कोई फोर्ट के अंदर कौन बैठा है, उससे एक रिमोट विलेज में जो फंक्शनिंग होता है, पंचायत बैठता है, उसका बहुत कम फर्क पड़ता था. एंड जब फर्क पड़ने लगा, जब औरंगजेब जैसे दरिंदे आके फेमिन क्रिएट करने लगे, लोगों खेती ध्वंस करने लगे, जजिया लगाने लगे, तब लोग फिर गुस्से में आ गए. फिर मुगल सल्तनत खत्म हुआ. सो दीज और एक चीज मैं बताना चाहता हूँ. आई थिंक 1937 का जो दैट वाज द टाइम व्हेन द मुस्लिम पर्सनल लॉ वाज इंट्रोड्यूस्ड, राइट. और फिर इसका सबसे बुरा असर केरल के मुस्लिमों में पड़ा, क्योंकि वो मैट्रिलिनियर सोसाइटी था. लॉ भी मैट्रिलिनियर था, लेकिन इसके वजह से वहाँ पे जो मतलब वुमेन राइट था, फीमेल राइट था, वो खत्म हो गया. उनका जो हक था, उनका जो सेइंग था इन द केरल मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी, वो खत्म हो गया. वो बुरखे हिजाब में आ गए. ठीक है. सो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ मुस्लिम पर्सनल लॉ, it destroyed the Muslims. It threw them into into a dungeon from which the Indian Muslim never recovered. राइट. मैं जैसे बोला कि भाई इंडिया में जो मेमन कम्युनिटी है वो मांस नहीं खाते थे, वो त्रिदेव को मानते थे. इंडियन मुस्लिम के पास टेम्पल्स हुआ करता था जिनका वो लोग देखभाल करते थे. आई थिंक और भी है. मैंने काफी सारे एग्जाम्पल दिया जहाँ पे दिखाया जाता था कि ठीक है. और काफी टाइम मुस्लिम लोग थे जो हिंदू नाम से ही पहचाने जाते थे, वो अलग से ही मुस्लिम नेम नहीं रखते थे. जब ये मुस्लिम लॉ आया, तब ऐसे रैंडम स्कैटर्ड जो सिविलाइजेशनल जो आइडेंटिटी था ऑफ इंडियन मुस्लिम्स, उनसे उसको बिल्कुल ही अपरूट करके एक नया अब्राहमिक फ्रेमवर्क में डाल दिया गया कि ये करो वरना तुम्हारे पीछे स्टेट पड़ जाएगा. तो फिर मुस्लिमों को वो सब रिग्रेसिव प्रैक्टिसेस मानना पड़ा. रिग्रेसिव लॉ उन्हें एक्सेप्ट करना पड़ा। और इसका सबसे बुरा असर किन पे पड़ा? सब कॉन्टिनेंट के मुस्लिम पे पड़ा। जो पाकिस्तान के मुस्लिम थे, आज मेमन कम्युनिटी 1993 में बॉम्बे में ब्लास्ट करने के लिए उनके कम्युनिटी का एक बच्चे ने किया है ना, वो मेमन कम्युनिटी है जो मांस नहीं खाते थे। जस्ट इमेजिन। सो ये मुस्लिम पर्सनल लॉ ने क्रिएट किया भाई ऐसे मेमन को, who became disgrace for Memon community, and now a hero for Memon community because Memon community overall now converted right through this Muslim personal law, to say the least.
Yeah, so the last is a comment on the question. The fact that the breaking of idols, etc., was all copied from Judaism, moved towards the monotheism by Elijah by declaring Yahweh as the only God. Why is Judaism not territorial and colonial unlike? It's a very good actually observation and comment.
Why is Judaism not Judaism is territorial because Jews they consider themselves as special people, and they think because they are special, their God has promised them a land which is Israel. So it is a territorial idea. It has been territorial since its inception by the very design of this prophet called Moses. Um, whether it is colonial or not, I mean, it is colonial, but you don't know how colonial Judaism is because uh, Jews most of the time work like a power behind the throne in and I don't want to be very controversial here, and I am not a Holocaust denier either. I still think Holocaust is one of the most gravest political and humanitarian crime that has ever happened in Europe and in the whole world. But so, for example, when German nationalism was in surge, at that time, there was a Jew sort of network of different businessmen, for example, and also of the intellectual Jewish class who started to mock the German nationalism, and then they started to collude with the Russian these Marxists in order to wage a rebellion in Germany. Okay, so and even still now, maybe you are looking with a very stool darshan. That's why you are not seeing, not being able to see the Jewish colonialism, but it is very much there. Okay, if you know the power of the Jew lobby in White House, and if you get to know it, right, you will be very much like shocked ki how much they are responsible for creating the Abrahamic narrative, like shaping up the Abrahamic narrative, destabilizing the Middle East, okay, for their own favor, because they also have this sort of bigger Israel kind of ideology, which they want to see happening in, let's say, coming 100 200 years, and that's why they are trying to continuously destabilize the Middle East, and they are seeking the help of America, who also have some other economic interest. And so these are not Abrahamic ideologies, they're cultish ideologies. Okay, they see human being, the mind of a human, soil, ocean, okay, trees, civilization, community as mere possession. Women, children, they're mere possession who must be possessed and enjoyed. Okay, it is irrespective of which ideology we are talking about.
Yeah. I we have few more good comments. We'll take them.
Sure.
Just filter them out. We'll take this one. So I'll take the comments, no problem. I take. Okay. So Bhushalidhi is saying, I have reservations in accepting the statement that the personal law culturally changed the Muslims. A lot of effort was put in to separate and uproot Muslims from civilizational culture. I think she is mentioning what happened in Bengal with Titumi doing a lot of
Hmm.
things to actually culturally separate because even till 1800s or even 1900s, okay, the Muslims and the Hindus actually had they worship the same deities, the local Gram Devta and local Devtas. But with Titumir and others who went to Mecca and then tried to become holier than thou in terms of their faith, and so this personal law actually abated this segregation of the communities which were living in quite harmony in many ways. Okay. And one more thing which actually kind of logical inference is that, as you mentioned, that the Memons were vegetarian, they spoke Gujarati, and they considered themselves as the sons and daughters of Gujarat, the culture itself, because Gujarati is mostly vegetarian culture. So this change in faith or change in belief was something of an artificial nature done when the invasions by the Islamic invaders who came in, and they were actually had to change their faith just to be alive. But they did not let go their culture, heritage, and local customs and traditions. So that's what. But in later stages, it was kind of appropriated by the British and the Ashrafs to actually create or solidify the divisions, which were actually a kind of a fleeting shadow which was there. The shadow became a proper dark room itself. Now, you have something to say on that?
No, see, I mean, in Indian subcontinent, Muslims were as diverse as Hindus. It's because they were people of this land, and obviously there was some sort of organicness in their belief, um, but and respect for Hindu faith, for example, right? um, एंड जैसे पहले काजी नजरुल इस्लाम हो जाए तो सारे लोगों ने इन लोगों ने भाई माँ काली की भक्ति गीत ही लिखा है, श्यामा संगीत लिखे हैं ये लोगों ने। इनका पढ़ो, इनका बुक पढ़ो तो इसमें मतलब हिंदूनेस झलकता है, ठीक है, और मे बी ट्रूली सिंक्रेटिक प्रोग्रेसिव थॉट झलकता है इन द रियल सेकुलर सेंस ऑफ, मतलब sense of literature, right? But see, we are not saying कि भाई हमें बिल्कुल ही एटाविस्टिक या फिर बहुत ही कम्युनल हिंदू हो जाना चाहिए, कम्युनल मुस्लिम हो, फाइन, मतलब अगर कोई ऑर्गेनिक सिंक्रेटिक कल्चर हो रहा है, दैट इज फाइन। इफ एनी मुस्लिम गाय इज राइटिंग अबाउट श्यामा संगीत, इफ एनी हिंदू गाय इज राइटिंग अबाउट कि ठीक है एक वन गॉड, इट इज क्लोज टू ब्राह्मण, ये वो, that kind of critique is fine. But when you start to say ki there is no god except Allah, there is the problem, ठीक है? If you are saying ki there is one god, Allah, and we let's name it Allah, that is a fine doctrine. But when you say कि भाई अल्लाह के अलावा और कोई है ही नहीं पूछने के लायक, that there is the main problem. और ये जब जैसे व्हेन यू आर मेकिंग एन इस्लामिक लेट्स से पर्सनल लॉ, तो पंगा उसी पे यही हो जाता है कि तुम यू आर क्रिएटिंग एन आर्टिफिशियल मोरालिटी, राइट, एन एक्सटर्नल इंटेंशन मोरालिटी, जहां पे तुम चीजों लोगों को डाल रहे हो जबरदस्ती कि ये ना करोगे तो भाई जेल हो जाएगा तुम्हारा, ठीक है। तुम अगर मान लो कि अगर तुम इस्लामिक अल्लाह का क्रिटिक करोगे तो तुम्हारा इस्लामिक लॉ के अनुसार सजा होगा। सो यहाँ पे वो जो प्रोग्रेसिव एटीट्यूड है सब कॉन्टिनेंट इस्लाम का वो खत्म होने लगा। एंड यू गिव द एग्जांपल ऑफ तितुमीर। सी तितुमीर वाज अ डिस्क्रीट फेनोमेना हु वेंट टू हज इन मक्का, met this guy Barelvi, was inspired by this whatever Salafi movement, and then he started his own the way of Muhammad movement in Bengal. So he got communalized after going to Arab. But here, through the implementation of this Muslim personal law, you are creating a radical Muslim in the land of India itself. So वहां पे प्रॉब्लम है।
Yes. So I think, yeah. So with regard to the context, especially these days, so the book, The Rise of Islam and the in the Bengal Frontier by Richard Eaton, actually he documents quite well in terms of how this change in population and demography happened. Okay. So it was not something to do with faith itself. It was to do with the tax which they had to pay, the job opportunities which were there, okay, the favors which were given to them in terms of land grants. So this change in demography is not related to faith itself. If they there was a faith problem, then why they would worship the local devatas for no reason? It doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. And
Right.
also, he documents it in the book itself that most of the people were actually they don't read the holy book itself. They in name they just have to take the name to actually get some more favors from the
Right.
government and Nawabs. But that's it. Yeah, so we'll take two more questions and then we will end our stream today. So there are lots of things that are coming, but let me just choose. Okay, this is a very controversial question. So you can, if you know the details, you can answer or we can skip.
Right.
So it
Do
says
you
the
think Hitler was a
Hitler was a
socialist?
socialist.
Unlike why leftists promote him as fascist, his his party's name was National Socialist German Workers' Party. Right, right, right. What is fascism? Fascism is socialism, by the way. In case you don't know, fascism is one kind of socialism. Nazism is national socialism. ठीक है? तो yeah, I think I was telling one of my friends कि हम सेकुलरिज्म को लेके जितना लिखते हैं कि इट्स pitfalls and how it is standing against the civilizational identity of India. And obviously, civilizational identity of India is not a genocidal identity. मतलब, it's not a very oppressive identity to sort of own. um, but जितना सेकुलरिज्म का डिस्कशन होता है उतना हम लोग सोशलिज्म का डिस्कशन नहीं करते, जबकि सेकुलरिज्म और सोशलिज्म दो वर्ड है जो इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में जबरदस्ती डाला गया है. ठीक है. नाउ रोल ऑफ सोशलिज्म इन दिस काइंड ऑफ कंट्रीज. तो जब नेशनहुड का आइडिया आया तब ये नेशनहुड में कब क्या था, मतलब ओवरऑल यूरोप में भी तो काफी हर तरह का रेस होते थे, राइट? रेस इन देयर टर्म्स. अलग अलग आइडेंटिटीज होते थे, अलग अलग पंथ्स होते थे, लेट्स कॉल देम. और उनको फिर वो आपस में घेटोवाइज होने लगे. ठीक है. और जब घेटोवाइज होने लगे फिर क्या किया, फिर इन्होंने ये नेशनल सोशलिस्ट आइडेंटिटी क्रिएट करने की कोशिश की. उसका मुद्दा ये था कि लेट्स से देयर इज एन आइडेंटिटी व्हिच इज बीइंग, लेट्स से, नॉट दैट मच डोमिनेंट बिफोर जर्मन. ओके, सो दे वुड आर्ग्यू कि वही जितना आबादी उतना हक, कि हम लोग यहाँ पे है तो हमारे लिए ये फैसिलिटी दे दो. ठीक है. एंड इन सोशलिस्ट टर्म ना, इसमें गलती इस जगह पे हो जाता है कि दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ पॉलिसीज, राइट, व्हेन यू से कि ये सेकुलर हो जाएगा, ये सोशलिस्ट हो जाएगा, हम सोशलिज्म अपना लेंगे, हम पता नहीं इनसे लेके उनको देंगे. इसमें प्रॉब्लम ये हो जाता है कि यू क्रिएट द वर्टिकल डिवीजन विद इन अ नेशन और विद इन अ टेरिटरी, विद इन अ सिविलाइजेशन, जो बहुत घातक होता है, जो यूरोप के लिए घातक हुआ. यूरोप मतलब had to go through two world wars only because he started to gradually accept socialism in its public policy. ठीक है. जहां से घेटोइजेशन क्रिएट हुआ, वहां से फिर इनका वियर्ड काइंड ऑफ नेशनहुड क्रिएट हुआ, वहां से सुपीरियरिटी इंफीरियरिटी ये सब चीजें क्रिएट हुआ, वहां से वर्ल्ड वॉर हुआ. ठीक है. और बात ये ठीक है, यूरोपियन सोशलिज्म प्रोबेबली वर्कड इन आवर फेवर बिकॉज वी डोंट नो, मे बी अगर वर्ल्ड वॉर ना होता तो ये जो कॉलोनी थे वो शायद इंडिपेंडेंट होते ना होते, वी डोंट नो. मतलब दूसरा गांधी पैदा हो जाता इतने में, दूसरा तीसरा जितने भी है पैदा कर देते हैं और उनको इंटरनेशनली एक्लेम करते हैं. अभी भी गांधी को पूजा जाता है. तो हाँ, मतलब सोशलिज्म इज समथिंग वी हैव टू सॉर्ट ऑफ रिसर्च मोर, हाउ इट अफेक्टेड यूरोप and how it is going to affect India, because we know that it is going to affect India in pretty much the same way, because India has similar amount of diversity of thoughts, foods, culture, wealth. Okay, तो इसलिए सोशलिज्म इंडिया के लिए बहुत घातक हो सकता है.
Yeah, so the last question, comment we will take, and it's a very interesting and a very befitting comment we will end the today. If we look at the Iranians, they too has their civilizational culture destroyed by the Arabs and Mongols. They became Muslims, but don't consider themselves Arabs and try to hold on to their pre-Islamic culture. So I will connect this to the especially Bengal, okay, where Bengali people became Muslims. Okay. but and that transition was purely economic, purely incentive based, not that they read the holy book, understood the holy book, and then say, no, I will become of another faith. Same way it happened that they were under the sword of Arabs, became Muslims, but they retained their cultural heritage that they had, the pre-Islamic heritage. So your comments.
नो सो फॉर एग्जाम्पल यहाँ पे काफी सारे इंडियन मुसलमान हैं जो खुद को अरब नहीं बोलते, वो खुद को टर्किश बोलते हैं, पता नहीं क्या क्या। मतलब पाकिस्तान हर दिन नया नया बाप क्रिएट करता है। कुछ दिन पहले अरब से बाप लाया था, फिर वही ईरान से अपने बाप बनाया ईरान को। आजकल तो वो पता नहीं कुछ एर्दोगन क्या चल रहा है, एर्तुगल गाजी कुछ चल रहा है, तो अभी उनका बाप टर्की है। और इनका बाप हर रोज चेंज होता रहता है। बीच में इमरान खान ने कोशिश किया कि हम लोग पता नहीं कहाँ समरखंड जाएंगे बाप ढूंढने, कि बाबर हमारा बाप है। तो ईरान अरब को बाप मानता है कि नहीं मानता है, इसमें फर्क नहीं पड़ता था। वेरी फैक्ट कि इट हैज जेनोसाइडेड ईरानियंस। ईरान का एक बहुत ब्रूटल जेनोसाइडल हिस्ट्री है। जो पढ़ोगे तो और भी मतलब डर लगेगा, बिकॉज ईरान सरेंडर्ड विद इन व्हाट 10 years 5 years। इस्लाम
30 years, I think. 30 years.
ना 10 years आई थिंक, 10 साल, हाँ 10-20 साल में खत्म हो चुका था ईरान। 30 मतलब 20 years में इटाली और स्पेन तक पहुंच गए थे ये लोग। तो हाँ मतलब ये बात ये है ना कि इस्लाम इज अ सबवर्टिंग आइडियोलॉजी, इस्लाम इज नॉट अ प्रोग्रेसिव एसिमिलेटिंग आइडियोलॉजी। तो ये इट वांट टू सबवर्ट द वेरी कोर ऑफ यू, योर आइडेंटिटी। मतलब ये क्रिश्चियनिटी भी करता है, क्रिश्चियनिटी और एलिगेंट कोट अनकोट एलिगेंट वे में करता है, बट इस्लाम भी सिमिलर चीजें करता है। इट वांट टू डिस्ट्रॉय योर वेरी आइडेंटिटी, योर हिस्टोरिकल कंटिन्यूअम, योर सिविलाइजेशनल कंटिन्यूअम। और जब ये सब मतलब खत्म करने लगता है, देन यू स्टार्ट टू फाइंड योर बाप, कि मेरा बाप कहाँ से आया है ना। एंड यू बिकम ऑब्सेस्ड विद दिस थिंग कि कौन बाप है मेरा, है ना। यू क्रिएट थियरीज हाइपोथेसिस टू अंडरस्टैंड हु यू आर। भाई तुम इसी मिट्टी में पैदा हुए हो, इसी मिट्टी में तुम जिस जहाँ पैदा हुए उसी नदी के बगल में बैठ के किसी ने ऋग्वेद लिखा था, किसी ने नासदीय सुक्ता लिखा था, किसी ने हिरण्यगर्भ सुक्ता लिखा था। और वहां बैठ के तुम बोल रहे हो कि नहीं, जिन्होंने ये सब लिखा था उनका बाप तो अरब का था। So it's an obsession. It's a very subverted. It's maybe it's a part of a Stockholm syndrome. Maybe yeah, it is sub category of Stockholm syndrome, जिससे ये लोग अपना बाप ढूंढते हैं।
I think we need a new PG thesis on this. Okay, last comment. Was this Naipaul's observation that
नया
okay,
नॉइपल।
requirement if complete denial of one's roots? I wonder why wonder uh, Thai affects our South Asian Muslims more than Middle Eastern people from say Persia or Syria. Oh, yeah, he meant that. He meant that. So yeah, I think Naipaul in his book Beyond Belief. So I think people who are listening to this, like Naipaul, who is a
No,
Nobel
but ये
laureate,
क्वेश्चन उल्टा
he
नहीं। I
wrote.
wonder why Thai affects our South Indian Muslims more
No, no,
than
no,
Middle East.
no, no, wonder that actually he mentioned that effect. So it's a spelling error.
अच्छा अच्छा।
So uh, so Naipaul's observation that the requirement, if complete
या
denials
राइट।
one's roots, I wonder that affects South Asian Muslims more than Middle. So see what she's saying that because in terms of Islamic ideology, correct. So you have to let go everything. Correct. So this is called Jahiliyyah, dark period. So once you become a Muslim, you have to consider your past ancestors, your past history as dark ages, Jahiliyyah. Okay.
राइट।
So then you have to let go everything. Okay. So now because the Arabs and the culture themselves, so they can't let go because it's their culture. Okay. But here they have to let go their own ancestral traditions, culture to become a more purer faith. So this comes from
राइट
that
राइट। नहीं नहीं,
psychological
सी द
impact.
पॉइंट इज, नहीं हम लोग बात बातों में ये बोलते हैं इंडोनेशिया के मुस्लिम को देख लो, थाईलैंड की मुस्लिम को देख
Hmm.
लो, है मलेशिया की मुस्लिम को देख लो। क्वेश्चन ये है कि वहां पे जो मंदिर है, अगर अंकोर वट है, वो तो अभी डिस्ट्रॉय नहीं कर सकते। बट वहां पे पूजा हो रहा है क्या? आई एम जस्ट आस्किंग, सब कुछ सेम है क्या? नहीं है ना, वहाँ नहीं पूजा होता है. दोज आर मियर डेड sort of bricks or stones laying there that they are minting money out of. उन्होंने क्रिएट भी नहीं किया, पूजा भी नहीं होता है वहां. वो इंस्टीट्यूशन किसी को हिंदू बना रहेगा. अंकुर भट्ट अगर खड़ा है, कम्बोडिया की किसी मुस्लिम को हिंदू बना रहा है क्या? कितने न्यूज में आया कि कम्बोडिया की एक वो अंकुर भट्ट में जाके 10,000 मुस्लिम हिंदू हो गया. हाँ, कोई एक कम्बोडिया के कोई आई थिंक कोई प्रिंसेस का आया था, बट वो हिंदू टेम्पल ने बनाया या इस्लाम से तंग आके वो बनाई है?
Indo
क्योंकि वो
Indonesia,
नो
Indonesia.
नो
It happened in
नो इंडोनेशिया ना, इंडोनेशिया में क्या, वो
yeah,
जो प्रिंसेस थी उसने इस्लाम का कोई क्रिटिक की थी और
yeah.
वो न्यूज़पेपर में छप गया, तो उससे जो वहाँ का जो कठमूल्य है वो दे गॉट एनरेज्ड. And because now she is princess, she has her own sense of honor, unlike these Katmullas. उसने बोला कि चलो कोई बात नहीं, मैं हिंदू हो जाती हूँ. इट इज नॉट कि कोई जाके उनको बहुत स्पिरिचुअल एनलाइटनमेंट है उससे वो हिंदू हो गई, ऐसा नहीं है. ये मैक्सिमम जो इस्लाम छोड़ भी रहे हैं वो अभी मतलब कोई ज्यादा ग्लोरी देख के नहीं छोड़ रहे हैं, जो जैसे न्यूज में ज्यादा दिखाया जाता है. वो लोग तंग आके छोड़ रहे हैं. अगर ईरान अगर 50% एथिस्ट हो गया है, अभी न्यूज आया है, ईरान इंडिया को देख के एथिस्ट नहीं हुआ है, या ईरान अरब से पंगा लेके ईरानियन लोगों ने एथिस्ट हो गया, ऐसा नहीं है. वो लोग जो भी ये जो मतलब खतरनाक आइडियोलॉजी, इससे तंग आके ये लोग छोड़ रहे हैं.
Yes. Yeah. So I think we have taken all the questions and comments. So we will end and end of the day we will see. So this is the book which I have highlighted in the comments. So if you want
Yeah,
to know
this is a
more
book
about it,
that, right,
so if you want to know more about it and read more about it. So the
right.
what we do in our stream is read written by things who other people have written. We are not writing or telling something that we have imagined by ourselves. We are reading from references from books, okay, and it's up to people you to like decide. Go and read for yourself. Why believe us? You don't believe us. Read the book and use your own common sense to understand what the author is saying. Try to connect the dots.
From primary sources.
So from primary, that's very important. Primary sources. Okay, that if somebody says I have done this and this has happened, somebody would have written this. So you have Akbar Aini, Akbar Nama. Okay. So in Akbar Nama, Akbar himself has asked to write these things. Okay. So that is called a primary source. Not some people writing an article in yesterday and say you quote that as okay, this is something which is truth because he wrote this in an article. You have to go back to the time and source where it's written and check and verify. So that we do. Okay, we are reading Ambedkar's book that Ambedkar himself wrote, what he thought about it. We are not quoting article written by somebody else so that he is interpreting. Ambedkar wrote the book. We are reading his book and we are trying to understand his thought process, what he thought about it, what he wrote about it, what was his process of understanding the politics of that time to capture a time in moment to actually educate ourselves and also educate and give information to the people who are listening to this or watching this. Then go ahead and read the book by yourself. We are as much readers as you are because you people are not reading it. So we are trying to encourage people to go and read them. The same way, if you want to know more about it, read the book and critique the book. That okay, this is wrong information. That whatever is written in the book by history of Hindu Nation, Hindu genocides, read the book and tell them that this is wrong information. Okay. Just by imagining, don't say a lot of things. Yeah, thank
Right.
you, Vijinta.
And also,
Thank you.
please show my new channel na, that I have opened in YouTube.
Oh, sorry. I just forgot. Yeah,
वो
could you
करके
just ping me on the chat the name?
क्या
I
था,
need to just search it because it.
क्वांटम क्वांटम पॉलिटिक्स. एक मिनट में लिंक भेज देता हूँ.
No, no. Actually, it will not come up right now because it's a new channel.
अच्छा
Just
अच्छा,
just
तो
give me
मैं
that link.
नाम लिख देता हूँ ना, क्वांटम पॉलिटिक्स.
Yeah.
तो
Put
दिखा
it.
दो एक बार क्वांटम. चैनल दिखा तो रहा है बट
Actually, you can share your screen. Just share your screen.
अरे हाँ,
You
आई
can do.
जस्ट कमेंटेड, सो दिस इज माय चैनल. I'm commenting from my
Okay.
channel only.
No, but
So
it will not show up here. You can share your screen actually. Go ahead and share your screen. I'll stop sharing.
share in my
Go ahead.
screen. तो कहाँ पे करें?
You will call present. Option will be present. I'm just searching for it, the channel itself right now. But
मैं अच्छा अच्छा अ,
okay, I have it. Hold on. I
ये
got the
रहा.
channel now. I got it. So yeah, this is the channel of Bijeet. So I asked him to create a channel, but finally he did it. So this is the biggest channel, Quantum Politics. So at the rate Quantum Politik. So here
Right,
Vijita actually shares his thoughts, his observations, and he's also writing a new book. So you will also like if you go and get this channel subscription, you'll also got to know that okay he's writing a new book, and he will be sharing a few insights on the new book he's writing. So
right,
like if you like Vijita and his comments and his program, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and also see the video that it's a quite interesting video that he's presenting quite recently. So and also we will have our also videos also being there in coming weeks. So also you can also watch people who are not able to watch our channel. Go ahead and watch his channel as well and see the video that we are putting out. Yeah. Yes.
yeah.
So anything else you want to say? Final words before we say goodbye to our
No,
audience.
I think yeah, I think I really enjoyed this discussion, and yeah, uh, let's meet sometime next week or the week next weekend. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So we will be again connecting. Tomorrow we are having a marathon reading session, okay, on a very special book on Sir Narendra Modi. So we'll read the whole
अच्छा.
book, and in the evening we are having a special guest in our program who will be talking about ancient Indian politics. So on the to celebrate 26th January as a Republic Day, so we are going to talk about a book and a person who will come and actually give an idea of Indian polity, that what Indian polity was there in the ancient times. To give, because people say India was founded in 1947, but to actually show a mirror to people that India as an entity, as a political entity, was there 5,000 years ago. So we have the author, we have the books and everything actually to tell people that how it happened, so that people can know about it. Thank you, Vijita. Thank you a lot
Thanks,
for
thanks a
coming
lot, and
for this.
yeah, good night.
Yeah, Jai Shri Ram,
Thanks
Vande
for
Mataram.
inviting. Jai Sri Ram.